Hey everybody, this is Christian from the Charles Mills Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about verbs. In our previous video, we discussed nouns and how they are used in sentences. Today we're going to discuss verbs and conjugation. So let me share my screen with you and we will get started. So share screen. Perfect. Okay. Does that look all right? We'll do that. Okay, cool. So I'm going to start today with the definition of a verb. Webster's Ninth Collegiate Dictionary defines a verb as a word that characteristically is the grammatical center of a predicate and expresses an act, occurrence, or mode of being that in various languages is inflected for agreement with the subject, for tense, for voice, for mood, or for aspect, and that typically has rather full descriptive meaning and characterizing quality, but is sometimes nearly devoid of these, especially when used as an auxiliary or linking verb. This is on page 1309 of Webster's Ninth Collegiate Dictionary, in case you're wondering where it came from. Again, this is like our noun definition, a quite verbose definition. So for our purposes today, we're just going to focus on the highlighted section. So grammatical center of a predicate and expresses an act, occurrence, or mode of being that in various languages is inflected for agreement with the subject. Now, it's still a bit dense, but I promise we're going to talk about the stuff that's highlighted in yellow. We're going to talk about that today in this video, but we need to explain subject and predicate first. But the basic core definition of a verb here expresses an act, occurrence, or mode of being. That is, if you take one thing away from what is a verb, it expresses an act, occurrence, or mode of being. That would be the thing to take away from this. So, in order to talk about conjugation, which is, we'll talk about that soon, we need to talk about a couple of things first, which are subject and predicate. We sort of alluded to this in the previous video. So let me remind you of how we alluded to it. Remember the sentence, this tree is big, that tree has apples, from our previous video. And then we took the nouns out, and then we took everything else except the nouns out of the sentence. That's not exactly subject and predicate, but it was done for a reason. The first part, which indicates that what we're talking about right here, is the subject, and it provides, like the thing that we're talking about. So it's an important part. And the second part right here, it indicates the relevance of what we're talking about. And it provides other details. But this is, in essence, what the predicate is. It provides like the relevance of what it is that we're talking about and other details. That's not an exact definition, but it's, for our purposes, how we're going to think of a predicate. So what I did here, I highlighted the verb in green, right? And then the nouns are all in yellow still. But basically, we go back to the definition here. The subject, oops, where's the subject? Right here. So the subject is usually pretty close to the front of an English sentence, and it determines how a verb is conjugated. So for the final part of the video, we're going to talk about how verbs agree with the subject. And the agreement tends to align with two dimensions of the subject, which are, the first dimension is it first, second, or third person? The second dimension is it singular or plural? So that leaves us with a total of 6 possibilities. First person singular, second person singular, third person singular, first person plural, second person plural, or third person plural. And just for practicality, I'm going to I'm going to give you basically some examples and think of, just to explain first, second, third person, singular and plural, I'm going to replace them with pronouns, right? So first person singular would be I, first person plural would be we, second person singular would be you, second person plural would be you or you all, you're addressing multiple people. Third person singular would be he, she, or it, and then third person plural would be they. You're addressing multiple people, right? And these are all typically things that you'll find as the subject of a sentence. So, and it can, those are pronouns that can be the subject of a sentence. And a lot of times a noun, well, more accurately, a noun phrase will be the subject of a sentence. So in this case, the subject is this tree, right? That's what we're talking about. And I'm reiterating a little bit, but it just kind of want to get you more comfortable with these different parts of a sentence before we jump into stuff. But what I want to, the way I want to end this is kind of talking about conjugation in general. So I might have to make this a little bit bigger. Let me make this just slightly bigger so it's easier to see. Okay, so, okay. So the verb to have in English, right, is most of the conjugations are the same. So for basically, for each combination of first, second, third, singular, plural, we have a conjugation. These are the aspects of agreement that we need the verb to have with the subject. So for the verb to have, it goes to have, has, have. So it's have in most of them, except for the third person singular. Now, when you look at other languages, and we'll use Spanish as an example, tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tenéis, tienen. There's a unique and distinct conjugation for each of these 6 possibilities. But in English, we have, most of the conjugations don't have distinctions between them, and we place more emphasis on, we rely more on on knowing what the subject is, and explicitly stating it earlier in the sentence, than Spanish does. Like, for instance, if I were to say, I have a pen, I guess we'll say, I have a pen. Actually, I do have a pen. In English, it's just I have a pen, right? So the I is the subject, have is the verb, and it agrees with the subject. In Spanish, you can say yo tengo un bolígrafo, but you could also just say tengo un bolígrafo. The subject yo is equivalent to I, but you can basically just get rid of it because tengo already, it indicates that that the subject is first person singular. So all of that information is contained within the verb in Spanish. But in English, you have to separate it out and you have to say I, because if you don't say I, you just say have a pen. Well, do you have a pen? Do we have a pen? Do they have a pen? You don't know, right? That's why that is. So We'll look at another couple examples here, right? To know is another verb. I'm gonna make this a little bigger. There we go. And it follows a very similar, it's actually the same pattern as to have, right? Everything is the same except for the third person singular. And you just add an S there, right? There you go. Now, a lot of verbs are like this, but not all of them. There are some irregular verbs. For instance, to be is an irregular verb. First person, it goes to I am. Second person, you are. Third person, he, she, it is. And then the rest, all the plurals, are. So what I'm going to do as well is we're going to look at these. These are just some common verbs. To be, to know, to have, to want, to do, to read, to need, to write, to see, and to sleep. These are all very common verbs. And yeah, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna give a quick example of a sentence here. Let me make this bigger. I need to sleep, right? So to need, right? This is how we conjugate need. First person, so we look at the subject first. This is, I don't know if you can see it, that's highlighted in yellow. Subject is I. So I is first person singular. So we use the first person singular conjugation of need, which is just need. And then to sleep. Why is it to sleep? Well, also, good question would be, why do all of these verbs have the word to in front of them? That is because in the unconjugated form, English verbs or infinitives is the unconjugated form of a verb. It's called an infinitive. They all are preceded by the word to. And that most of the time you're going to conjugate a verb, but when you don't conjugate a verb is when you have two verbs in a row. So for instance, I need to sleep. Since both of the verbs are right next to each other, the first one gets conjugated based on the subject, and then the second stays unconjugated. So I need to sleep. To sleep is the unconjugated form of the verb. And if that's too much to remember, you're like, oh, I don't really want to remember it's an infinitive. Just remember, if there's two verbs next to each other, you stick a to in between them. That's a quick, simple fix for that. Hopefully will be useful in the future. But anyways, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And in the next video, we'll be talking about subject, verb, object structure, as well as going through some more examples with these sentences and kind of reviewing the nouns and the verbs. Because we talked about a lot of grammatical concepts, and I just kind of want to bring it all together in the next video. So thank you for watching, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Take care.